Ya, sige lang, ano naman ako, gamitin niyo na kayo. Maling-maling, papunta kami doon sa boat. So, umuulan, madalas, kaya careful lang tayo. Boarding right. Okay lang nakaano naman ako. Nakakakita ko, kumakakita ko. Thank you. Yung mga nauna, dito na sila. Nasa si Ate Juni. There's my Juni. She's on the first line. Na kami. Sasakyan na pero pababa pa. Dito na kami sa boat, guys. Naghihintay na lang na andar. Umuulan talaga. Ayan na. Kaya lang baka maubusan ako ng battery, hindi ko ma-cover up lahat. It's okay. May pasilip lang. Yan ang view, guys. Yan ang view. Ang ganda. Si Ate Juni. Basang-basa na. Yes, please. Si Tita. Si Tita Ganda. Yan ang Tita Ganda namin sa tour namin palagi. Kasama lagi, #1 fan ng tour bus.
With us to inventions at play. And it's actually home to the first skyscraper. It's called the Home Insurance Building, and it was 10 stories tall. So, not exactly impressive by today's standards, but back in the time that was pretty remarkable. Now today you're going to quite literally see buildings that scrape the sky, and I'll be sure to point out some different architectural facts about them. So let's start this way. So I'm going to start off on your left-hand side, actually. If you look to your left, that is the London House. It's called the London Guarantee Building, and it was done in the 1920s by Alfred Oshtler. That's an example of what's called the Beaux Arts style. So there's an ornately decorated bottom, and then in the center you'll see just that plain stack of floors, and then you have an ornately decorated top. That's called Beaux Arts. Now if you look at the top of the London House, you'll see a temple, an architecture that's called a Tempiety. And I always like to peek up there because if you are looking to pop the question to your significant other, you can rent that temple for $10,000 for 1 hour. Wow. Pop the question, then they pop champagne. It's a pretty good deal. We're going to swing back over to your right-hand side. And this is the second tallest building in Chicago. This is Trump International Hotel and Tower, done in 2009 by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. Now the lead architect on this building was Adrian Smith, and he's a local Chicagoan. He's actually more famous for designing the tallest building in the world, which is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. So there's a 5-star hotel, then a restaurant on the 16th floor, and luxury condos above that. It is 1,386 feet tall. If you were to take Trump Tower and stack another tower on top of it, that would be how tall the Burj Khalifa is.
Yes. Wow.
So this building has 3 different setbacks, and they are each at the height of a building and its surrounding. That's kind of an iconic building. And the first one is at the same height of the next building on your right-hand side, which is AMA Plaza. Now this was the last office building designed by the German architect Mies van der Rohe. And he really revolutionized architecture with his international style. So as we come out from the bridge, if you look to the right, you'll notice there's not a lot of extra ornamentation, just those I-beams in the window.
Yes.
And that allowed them to build quickly and cheaply. So it is now home to the British Langham Hotel. Mies van der Rohe actually came to Chicago in the 1930s and taught at the Illinois Institute of Technology. A lot of his students really embraced his style. One of the students had another idea. He built these next two towers called Marina City. And those were done by Bertram Goldberg. He had a very different philosophy than his teacher. He said there are no right angles in architecture, so there should be no right angles. Oh, let me try that again. There are no right angles in nature, so there should be no right angles in architecture. So these are 60-story cylindrical concrete buildings, and they were designed to be a city within a city. A lot of people had moved out to the suburbs, and they were trying to draw them back to live downtown.
Right.
So it had everything that you needed right within the buildings. There was a bank, a dry cleaner, grocery store, restaurant, ice skating rink, bowling alley, a marina, and then the first 19 floors are just for parking. Now, if you want to kind of imagine what the unit's like, think of the core of an apple as where the elevator is. And then when you walk into the unit, it kind of goes out like a piece of pie. So it's narrow when you first enter it, and then it gets wider as it goes out. With the glass going up is the American Bar Association, done by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. But then this 3-story addition along the river is newer. That was done by Geshen Partners. And that provides some dining options that have been very popular. On the lower level is Pizzeria Portofino. And on the third level is RPM Seafood. So if your parents are in town, go check it out.
Right, okay.
Now, if you were on this tour about 100 years ago, it would look a lot different because most of the buildings were just warehouses. And so this next building on your right is one of those warehouses. This is the Reed Murdoch Center, done in 1914 by George Nimmons. And if you look at this in the center, you'll see a clock tower. And those were really important in the early 1900s because watches were considered a luxury. So in order to get to work on time or simply know what time it is, a lot of people relied on the clock towers. All of the clock towers in Chicago are still functioning and accurate. So you don't need to pull out your phone in the rain today. You just find the nearest clock tower. Now they had to get rid of a bay of windows in that building to make room for this LaSalle Street Bridge, which we're passing underneath. This next building on your right-hand side is 300 North LaSalle, done in 2009 by Picard and Chilton. And this is an award-winning building from LEED, standing for Leaders in Energy and Environmental Design. You can see the plaque on the fence. And it won the highest level possible, which is the platinum level, because it's made of over 90% recyclable materials. And then the building is actually cooled using the river water. So there's not an AC tower. The river water goes through the building, cools it down, gets filtered at the top, and comes back into the river. So we'll see some other electrified buildings on this tour as well. Now, does anyone remember the Merchant Marshall Field? It's now merged with Macy's. But he had 14 warehouses around the city of Chicago. And he wanted to consolidate those into one building, which would have to be a pretty big building. Check out on your right, the Merchandise Mart. This was done in the 1920s by Graham Anderson, Probst and White, and it is 4.25 million square feet. It's a footprint of about 15 acres. It was the largest building in the world until the Pentagon was built. And this is a great example of the Art Deco style in architecture. So you have a limestone facade, and you have vertical lines really emphasizing the height of the building. There's some setbacks there at the top, and then some geometric ornamentation. It's called Art Deco. Now that building was sold to the Kennedy family for back taxes, and they held on to it for a while. They bought it for $16 million, sold it in 1998 for $575 million. I think they're doing all right. They held on to this next plot of land though, which is known as Wolf Point. And this was the original downtown of Chicago, where the first tavern and hotel and trading post. And this is where Chicago got its name. people were talking about this land here, which was referred to as the Native Americans as Chicago, and that evolved into Chicago. But really, Chicago stands for the crops that were grown there, which are smelly onions. So Chicago is named after the smelly onion. Now we are at the junction of the river. If we were to go right, that would be down the south branch, but we are heading north, down the north branch. Now off to your right is another LEED certified building with that red statue in front. That statue is called Constellation by Santiago Calatrava, and that is a residential building by Picard and Chilton as well. That is LEED certified gold. Now in this section of the river, you're going to notice a lot of innovation by engineers and architects. Because we have friendly people, is one thing we have. And we also have the railroad tracks on this side. So this building on your right, 150 North Riverside, is also known as the Upside Down Building. So this was done by Geshen Partners in 2019. And they only had a small plot of land to work with a river on the side and railroad tracks on the other. So they built a building with a solid base, and then it jets out and goes up. So the way they keep this building steady is by using a mass damper system. So the building starts to lean to the left. There's actually silos of water at the top of the building that are on rollers, and they roll over to the right, evening the building back out. Same thing if the building leans to the right, the rollers are computer automated to roll over to the left, keeping the building nice and steady. Now next on your right is 100 North Riverside, and this was done in 1990 by Picard and Chilton. By Perkins and Will. And on the right side, you kind of notice a typical skyscraper-looking section. This side is only 13 stories tall, and it's actually being suspended in the air. The switching yards for the railroad tracks are right under that building, so they were unable to build down and support the building. So what they did was they used 5 trusses to hold the building from above, thinking if I were to hold a cup of water with my hand from above right now, like that. So if you turn up behind your right shoulder, you'll notice one of the 5 trusses, that white X up there, that's literally suspending that building in the air, kind of like a diving board. Next on your right is 2 North Riverside, and this is another great example of that Art Deco style. So limestone facade, vertical lines, emphasizing the height, the setbacks, and that was the first building in Chicago to have an outdoor plaza incorporated into it. Now when you build along the river, there's some element of outdoor space that you must incorporate. Now look up to your right and you'll notice the train tracks. You might see some trains from the Metro or the Amtrak. And so these buildings are quite literally built above the train tracks. And in order to build them, they had to lease the air from the railroad company. So if you own your home, you also own the air above your home, the air rights. And that's so people can't build on top of you. Well, since the railroad owns this land, this is called the Gateway Center. These gateway buildings are literally leasing the air from the railroads to build above. Now these are done by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, and they're pretty similar to that international style that we saw by Mies van der Rohe, that different architectural firm. And you cannot hear or see or feel or smell anything from the railroads underneath. They did an incredible job engineering these so that you never know that trains are running right below you. And this kind of revolutionized the West Loop neighborhood of Chicago, which would be further to your right. It's now a very trendy area, a lot of popular places to eat, thanks to the Gateway Center. And they're called Gateway 1, Gateway 2. Here on your right is going to be Gateway 3. And they got a little tired of those black steel buildings, so they took some precast white panels and plopped them on there and called it, there we go. But these are all done by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. The first 2 in the 60s, this one in the 70s. And then the lead architect on that last gateway building, Gateway 4, kind of a curved glass, was James DeStefano. Now, Captain Jason is turning the building so that we can look straight ahead at the tallest building in Chicago. Yeah, take it in. This is the Willis Tower, formerly known as the Sears Tower. And when it was built, it was the tallest building in the world, 1979. It is no longer the tallest building in the world, but it is the tallest building in Chicago. It is 1,456 feet tall, 110 stories. Now we can't see it with the clouds, but there's two white antennas sticking out the top of this building. I'm gonna ask a question to the boat, a little pop quiz. It's the teacher in me. Thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no. Do those two white antennae at the top of the building count toward the height of the building? Yes or no? What do you think?
Yes. Yes.
They do not.
Oh,
That is a hot topic in architecture. People will get really fired up about this. But because it is not permanently attached to the building, the radio antenna, they're not included in the height. Unlike a decorative spire that serves no purpose but is permanently attached to the building, is included in the height. So that is the tallest building in Chicago, even without those white antenna. And they have an observation deck on the 103rd floor where you can go out onto the ledge. It's 5 glass boxes, and you can look down and see the city from above. There's also another option at the former John Hancock building called the Tilt, and they tilt you 30 degrees to look out over the city. Now I mentioned that it is called the Willis Tower, but Chicagoans will call it the Sears Tower passionately because it was built for Sears and Roebuck. And then when they moved out in 2009, a British insurance group called Willis, they actually bought the naming rights to the building. So that's why it is now known
There you
as
go,
the
that's
Willis
that
Tower.
girl.
Well, that is the same company that insured the Titanic. So I'll just let that sink in. See what I did there? Thank you. But the main tenant of the Willis Tower is United Airlines. They occupy the most space in that building. Now, on your right, with this kind of serrated corners and pink granite, is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And that was done in the 1980s by Fujikawa and Johnson. The serrated corners were very intentional by having them designed that way. It allows them to have 16 corner offices on each floor. So I guess those traders like their corner offices. The trading floor in the center is supported by the towers on each side of it. Now the Chicago Mercantile Exchange has since merged with the Board of Trade, so it's no longer housed here, but it is now leased out to different office groups. Something interesting about Chicago is that all of the bridge houses have a different design. So if you look off to your right, you'll see just how close they built the building to that bridge house, leaving no room to spare. And do we have any opera fans on board? Okay, a couple, wonderful. On our right is the Chicago Civic Opera Building, home to the Chicago Lyric Opera. And this was done in the 1920s by Graham Anderson, Probst and White. And it's done in the French Renaissance style. So this is actually the back of the building. From the street side, you'll see a lot of ornamentation and figures. Now this is the second largest opera house in the country after the Met in New York. It's a 3,500 person auditorium and is known for its beautiful Art Deco lobby. So they actually do tours of the inside of that building. Building on our right hand side is the newest building on the river, and this is the Bank of America building, done in 2021 by Gesher Partners. Some people think it looks similar to that upside down building we saw earlier. It's done by the same firm, but this has a 40-foot lobby and it's lofted up there, allowing there to be an uninterrupted view to the entrance of the Civic Opera building. There is also a 1-acre park on the other side of this building, and a restaurant here with a celebrity chef. It's hard to get reservations. Now, if you are someone that likes a little bit of history, you're going to like this next part. If you look on our right hand side, you're going to see a historic building. And I don't know if you've ever visited it, but it's called Starbucks. It sells all sorts of coffee. Just kidding, it's not the historic part. That red brick building is the historic building, the Great Lakes building, with the ivy growing up it. And that was the site of the wigwam in 1860, where they held the Republican National Convention. And the man that was nominated went on to be the 16th president of the United States. He was a tall black cat, Abraham Lincoln. Now we are going to be turning back down the main branch of the river. We'll head out toward the lake, but we won't be going out on Lake Michigan. We'll just kind of go up to it and turn around and head back to the dock. Now when we turn, you'll see the start or the end, depending on which direction you're going, of the Chicago River Walk. And that was completely redone in 2016 by Barney and Associates, so that you have a completely uninterrupted walkway all the way out to Lake Michigan. Now if you look off to your right, that green curved building is the Nuveen building, also known as 333 West Wacker. And that was the first skyscraper that Cohn, Pedersen, and Fox ever created. It's a great example of contextualism, and that is when the footprint of the building pays homage to the environment in which it's built. So you'll notice there's this curve in the river, and there's a curve in the building. Now that is also the building where Ferris Bueller's dad worked. So if you've seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, his office building is up in the 333 West Wacker. He looks down at the parade happening below, but really he wouldn't have seen anything because the parade was about 6 blocks inward, but that's movie editing for you. Now we're going to be going under a bridge. We've been going under many bridges. There are 37 bridges on the Chicago River, and they all open in the center. They're called bascule trunnion bridges. So they open when sailboats need to get through to head out to Lake Michigan. But they only open on Wednesdays and Saturday mornings from May until October. So it's quite a sight to see if you're out there. Now look down at the river level on your right-hand side, and you're going to see 30 different projector screens. And that is because every night at 9 o'clock and again at 9:30, a digital art show is projected off to the left on the Merchandise Mart. It is called Art on the Mart. And it's completely free. If you were to be down in this section of the river, there's also speakers to hear the audio that goes along with it. But it's the largest permanent digital art installation in the world. I recommend checking it out. Now look underneath this bridge here, and you're going to see a silver structure. That is called an eyelash. And those are there to protect pedestrians from any dust or dirt that might fall down from the bridge, just like our eyelashes protect our eyes. Now if you look up to the right, you probably can't even tell that this building was done at 2 different times. So the left 2/3 was done in the 20s. And then the plot of land to the right was deemed too small to build on. So in the 80s, they built a section to connect the building, and then added those 4 stories at the top to make the buildings kind of blend together. At the nighttime, you'll see those columns lit up in different colors, and it looks extra beautiful. Next on our right is the LaSalle Wacker building. This was done in the 1920s. And right recognized its architectural style. It's got that limestone facade, there's those vertical lines drawing your eyes up, set back there, geometric ornamentation. Anyone remember what that style is called? Yes. Did you say Art Deco? Yes, Art Deco. Nice, nailed it. So, we noticed that from before. This next building is a very different architectural style. As we come out from the bridge to your right, and this is an example of postmodern architecture. So this was done in the 90s by Ricardo Bofill, and it has those Roman arches at the bottom. At the top is kind of like Greek pediment style, and then all that steel and glass going up the center is known as the modern elements. Right next door is 55 West Wacker by C.F. Murphy, and that is an example of brutalism. So that comes from the French word brut, standing for raw. It's built out of raw materials like concrete, and it's not intended to look inviting. Typically, state penitentiaries or government buildings are done in that brutalist style. I want you to look straight ahead and up and to the right. And it was originally the Carbon and Carbide building. It was designed in 1928 by the Burnham brothers. Now they were at a New Year's Eve party and were inspired by a bottle of champagne. So that's sometimes referred to as the Champagne Building. They built that during Prohibition, so I guess they're letting us know how they felt about that. It is now home to the Pendry Hotel. I'm staying at the Pendry Hotel. It used to be the Hard Rock Hotel. The hotel's been kind of changed names for all of them. Now, if you look off to your right at the river level, you'll see the Vietnam Memorial. It has the names of all of the soldiers from Illinois that are either missing in action or lost their lives in the Vietnam War. Beyond that is the Jewelers Building, and that has a dome structure at the top called a Belvedere. And that was home to a speakeasy called the Stratosphere Lounge. Remember that Chicago's notorious gangster Al Capone used to enjoy a cocktail at the Stratosphere Lounge. Other people said he was already locked up by the time it opened, so might not go down that rabbit hole and see what we find out. Now again, on your right-hand side is Mather Tower. It is the skinniest skyscraper in Chicago, done in the 1920s by Hubert Biddle. And it was also the tallest building in the world when it was constructed for 2 weeks. And if you look at the very top, you'll notice that the coloring is a little bit different on those top 4 floors. That is because they needed to, it was starting to deteriorate, they needed to fix the building, but they weren't able to fix it on site. So they actually removed that section and then brought it back in on a helicopter and replaced it on top there. So we're kind of back to where we started, but remember we're going to keep going out to the lake and then we'll turn around and come back. So you'll see this London Guarantee building again. It's now home to the London House Hotel. If you're looking for a good rooftop with a view of the city, everyone would recommend the London House. That was also the site of Fort Dearborn in 1908, the first military fort. If you're interested, you can go up to the street level there, and there's bronze plaques in the ground that show you the outline of where the fort used to be. Now look over to your left-hand side, and you'll see the Chicago Tribune building. And this is actually the result of a design contest held by the owner of the Tribune for the most beautiful office building. There were over 260 entries, and this was the design chosen by Hood and Howells in 1920, done by Hood and Howells in 1925, the neo-Gothic design, similar to the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, France. Now look back over to your right, and look off in the distance and see those white balconies coming off of that tall building. That is called the Aqua. And that was done in 2009 by Jeannie Gain from Gain Studio. When it was built, it was the tallest building in the world, designed by a lead female architect.
Female.
And it is also the site. Does anyone watch Ozark on Netflix? A couple people. Season 1, episode 1, a little something happens on the balcony. That happened at the Aqua. Now, again, look on your right past this brick building, and you'll see a tall white building with black lines that's kind of hidden by the fog at the very top. That is the Aon Center, done in the 1970s by Edward Durrell Stowe. It is the 4th tallest building in Chicago. It's also kind of known for being the $80 million mistake. You want to know what happened? So it was originally clad in Italian Carrara marble, fancy marble used by for statues like Michelangelo used for David. And it was cut a little too thin to survive the Chicago winters. So after about 20 Chicago winters, the marble began to crack. And they were worried about people getting injured, or sure they didn't want any litigation issues. So they had to reclad the entire building in North Carolina granite. It cost $1 million per floor to do so, which was half the cost it took to put up the building in the first place. So I think Edward Durrell Stowe learned that you can't take marble for granted. Now we weren't feeling that? That's fine. It's fair. Now we know. Well, I mentioned. Now next on our right here is the Sheraton Hotel, owned by Solomon Caldwell and Benz. It is the 4th largest hotel in Chicago. It's known for having the largest ballroom in the city. So it's about the size of a